Really appreciate everybody joining us today. I think this is going to be a really interesting and I think really relevant conversation as we think about the quantum ecosystem and advancing at I think a really rapid pace. Just hanging out in some of the sessions today and listening to all the people talk. I know we're in a real race, I think, against China and other adversaries that are out there. And I think in order to keep the U.S. and our partners ahead, we need to have a very strong, thriving, not only private industry or private sector, but also have that sector have really strong relationships and partnerships with government. And so that's the reason that we're here today. And I think we've got a really good panel that represents both the private industry as well as government. And I'll start out with a few different questions here, but what I'd like to do too is I always find these sessions are better if the audience kind of joins in. So as I ask questions, if you have a follow-up question or something you'd like to dive a little deeper on, please don't hesitate to raise your hand and we'll make sure your questions get answered in this thing. So don't let it be us just up here talking. So what I wanted to start with is really talk about the role of government in this quantum space and how it can work, I think, successfully or in partnership with private industry. So, our representative from DOE is here, which I know has done quite a bit of work in the quantum space. So we've seen DOE drive large-scale quantum research. If you look across government, we've seen NIST now go ahead and set these PQC standards, right, that every agency needs to be migrating towards. Global competition continues to accelerate. I think government's role, as we're following it, is really starting to shift from, hey, they funded a lot of the initial research that was out there to kind of get things up, running, and going. But now I think it's going to have to shift to more enabling adoption and enabling rollout of these solutions into a production environment, whether that's a quantum computer being used or migrating agencies to these new post-quantum encryption algorithms that are out there. So I guess a question for the panel here in general is what role do you think government should play now in expanding the use of quantum technologies? And how do these partnerships with industry, I think, really strengthen not only the U.S. government, but then our allies also? So maybe I'll start, Michael, with you from DOE.
Thank you. So just maybe in the spirit of full disclosure, I work for Sandia National Labs. We are a federally funded research and development center. So strictly speaking, a contractor to the DOE. Thank you for the tip. FFRDCs are kind of a unique beast. There's 17 DOE labs in the U.S. We are honest brokers. We're obliged to do that. We have a deep pool of expertise, kind of continuing capital of expertise, if you will. And so I think that enables us to play a unique role in a quantum ecosystem, whether that be US-based or global. Maybe the quick comment I'll make with respect to the shift is that there's this idea the DOE has developed called co-design. They've employed it successfully for high-performance computing. And I think there's room for that idea in the context of quantum computing as well. It's essentially a way for communication with industry partners, what it is that DOE cares about in terms of its applications by means of something called a proxy application or like a mini application, essentially a way to stress an architecture, in this case a quantum computer's architecture, in a way that's representative of a full-scale eventual application of a large-scale utility-scale machine. And so I think that could be a really effective way for partnering between the national labs and industry through that type of a co-design communication.
Yeah, so co-design is really, I think, an interesting approach to working with industry. It kind of shares the risk, if you will, one. And then the other thing that I like about it is it also takes a look at actual use cases. So you're not building something in a lab and think, hey, this may be applicable for everybody. You're actually working against real world problems.
That's right.
Yeah. Freeke, do you have anything to mention?
Yeah, so I'm from Europe, and in the Netherlands, I built up the Quantum Delta initiative. And I think we have a lot to learn if it comes to this topic from what's going on in the US. I think we have been funding the quantum ecosystem mostly through grants, grants and some loans and things like that. But in the end, procurement, so tendering and buying as a launching customer, government institutions doing that, I think you're very far advanced from us. And that shift is being made. So Europe launched its quantum strategy just before summer. And there it's also emphasized that we'll continue to go this route. And already in Germany and Finland, you see these sort of equivalents of national labs like VTT or DLR. They have been tendering and buying quantum computers from providers. And I think that's a very good way, and indeed also to co-design, because your specs, you can bring them forward and you have companies addressing those. And also, the DARPA program, of course, is a very big inspiration for Europeans. So we are also now trying to get the same kind of program as well, which has been tried before. It never has worked, but keep on trying.
Yeah. We're going to talk some about this a little later, but I'm curious from the Europe perspective, are you seeing more, what I would say, production rollouts to use quantum, or are you still more in the research, development, let's try to figure out kind of where it fits and what value we can derive from it?
I think we are getting to the production of it. There's this joint undertaking for HPC. There are several quantum systems being acquired in that infrastructure. And we're also building pilot lines for the fabrication of these quantum chips. So I think we're getting in the production phase. At the same time, the end user perspective is still also something that really needs to be developed. So looking at, for instance, health, and what it can do for medicine. And for instance, Denmark is very strong with that, with Novo Nordisk and everything that's going on. So, yeah.
Patrick, what about you? You can give us the perspective from private industry.
Yeah. Well, from private industry and then also from a security and specifically a post-quantum perspective, the government's role has been multifaceted. I think that they are the primary driver of post-quantum cryptography. They are the ones that have done a lot of the research for post-quantum algorithms. They're the ones that are going to be and are writing requirements that will eventually trickle down and then funding research with industry. But I think one thing that gets lost is, aside from the planning, the budgets, the requirements, is the government's role in adoption, pushing solutions and capabilities that are developed in partnership with the government into the mainstream. And I think that the government does a great job, and maybe too much so, of planning and over-planning. And then these solutions wind up trickling out in proof of concept in the labs. And I think that the government really needs to work with private industry, with small companies, the innovators, with the labs, but then also line up those incentives with the large primes, who eventually are going to be doing a lot of the rollout of not only quantum tech, but post-quantum cryptography as well. And one good way to do that is to get these solutions actually out in front of people, in front of warfighters, in front of operators, not just in events like these, but in real experimentation events. For instance, we're participating in an event next week called NetModX. It's an Army event. They're bringing together a whole bunch of different solutions from primes, from small businesses, into a live exercise in front of government PMs and SMEs. And those events are really critical, because when you have the perspective of the operator involved, that's when you start to line up the incentives and the use cases from the lab into the mainstream.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago over at Fort Bragg, the JSOC. They've basically stood up and said at the beginning of the program that the Army is really tired of admiring the quantum problem. Like they're actually going to do something about it. And I'm sitting there in the audience going, yeah, okay. And then they said, look, anything we're doing now, we got to have a result in the next 12 months. And I think you'll start to see with some of these CSOs and various programs that are being launched, if they follow through with the approach is one of, hey, let's pilot 2 or 3 different solutions. So that's kind of our market research and study. Get it in front of actual, warfighters, to your point. And if it's successful, we can use that as the launch pad to then potentially go to scale, right? So that, I think, can kind of shrink, hopefully, right, that program of POC, over-analysis. Vendor goes, hey, I'm just tired of dealing with this. I'm going away. And it never really happens, or you don't get an optimal solution. So,
and one of the programs in that vein that I'm very familiar with and we at QSecure have utilized is the Small Business Innovative Research Program, SIBR program, which is a dedicated pool of R&D dollars that's given to Army, Navy, other organizations throughout the government to fund special interest projects such as post-quantum. Some of them are open topic, but some of them do have constraints, and whether it's the Army or one of the other services has an idea of what they need. It could be for some sort of quantum use case, it could be for a post-quantum use case, but the idea is to give small businesses the opportunity and the capital to help build these solutions. But the capital is and the revenue is great, but really the most valuable part is for the interactions with the warfighters and the customers. Our product has really evolved from these SIBR programs, and it's because we've had direct interaction with who's going to be our end user. And so the direction that we started off in, we've realized now there's a lot of different capabilities that we're missing from the product that we've now added in on behalf of our Air Force and Army customers. And so, again, I think that sort of personal touch from the end users, from the folks that actually are going to be using the solution is so valuable. And that's really the catalyst that's going to help bring these solutions out of R&D and into the mainstream. And then there's another process, which I know we'll get to, which is crossing that valley of death. You have a technical sponsor who now knows you intimately, who knows potentially the capabilities and the potential for impact of your solution or your capability. But getting to the next level of the program management and the congressional dollars so that you can continue to roll out these solutions is another beast. And so I know we'll talk about that later, but it requires, again, multiple levels of engagement with the government, but it starts with that personal touch and getting real operators involved.
Yeah, and again, I'll kind of echo it because I've done a lot of work with small businesses around the SBIR and the STTR programs. It's a really great way to build a product that's around actual requirements versus, hey, we think somebody's going to want this. So, and again, it's a good way to, as a small business, to get really non-dilutive funding to help you. Now, we've talked a good bit about DoD and how they're collaborating, but I'm curious from a DOE perspective. I mean, you all do a lot of work in the experimentation phase and defining requirements phase. Maybe you can talk about how you all structure collaborations and research with private sector.
Okay. So I'll probably echo a lot of what Patrick has said. I think this notion of mission-inspired research is really critical. I think in order for that to work, you have to bring together researchers, that could be scientists, engineers, but also bring in the end user representatives, maybe bring in investors, policy experts, if that's applicable, and try to get the community talking as soon as possible. I think that research can be influenced. I don't think it's stifled by those kinds of perspectives,
right,
but I think it can be influenced in a way to be born relevant and therefore have a much better chance of clearing the valley of death and actually being adopted by someone for whom it's solving a real problem. I think there's another element here, which is that as you bring together these different players, each of them may be accustomed to working at a different tempo, and to aligning that, I think, is also a critical element. So, startup, for example, might be moving at a pretty quick pace. I spent a few years in one, so that was definitely a pretty exciting experience. And so having everyone contribute at a time and at a cadence that keeps their contributions relevant, I think, is also essential. Maybe the final point I'll make, you guys talked about some test opportunities or exercises where you get to participate. Something that I personally think is an ideal end state is a single facility, or maybe it could be a network of facilities that co-locate these kinds of experts under one roof. And I think it's a way to collaborate in one location, have hands-on access to hardware, hands-on access to environments or emulation of those environments that are representative of an ultimate application. And I'm going to put in a plug for New Mexico here, if I may. The state is by no means unique. I mean, there's something happening here in Maryland, Illinois.
It was a really big announcement today from the governor of Maryland. They're going to spend $1 billion over the next 5 years to stand up an entire quantum
hub. All the way in my hotel room preparing my remarks.
Microsoft is the first participant in it. So big program there.
So I think that, the states are really leaning in, and so at least in the Southwest, we have some regional initiatives, but also opportunities for creating environments where government representatives or folks from the government can come in and get a direct line of sight, talk to all these various stakeholders around a piece of hardware, and gain the sort of insight that could then inform their own decision making. And I think that's so we'll see how that plays out. Early days in New Mexico. But again, it's a model that seems to be getting replicated across the country, and I think likely to be very effective.
Yeah, to say the replication, we mentioned Maryland, but I was at a couple of events about 3 weeks ago, and they had the city of Chattanooga and the city of Chicago are all there trying to build out hubs as well too. So if you're in the audience and you have a quantum solution, you're thinking about how do I engage, you can look at the federal government, but there's also a lot of work being done at the state level. As well, where they're investing in this.
And if I may just add one quick point, I think some of that is driven by the fact that, I think the quantum ecosystem, if you want to call it that, you will have the pure play companies that are developing some specific computing or sensing technologies, but they're going to be embedded in an ecosystem of supply chain players, quantum adjacent players. That is a lot of jobs. Those are not just PhD jobs, a lot of technician opportunities. So I think states are, I would say, incentivized to figure out how they can develop that kind of an ecosystem locally, and then bring in all the economic development to that particular location, whether that's Chattanooga, Chicago,
New Mexico,
what have you.
Yeah. So Freeke, what are they doing in Europe? Maybe can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah, well, this really resonates what we are doing in Europe. So in Delft, we have built this House of Quantum facility, and that's actually what you're mentioning. It's bringing under one roof the lab facilities, the fab facilities, but even our DoD, so our Ministry of Defense, has its office in that building. So it's a place where various companies come together, also the scientists, but also even government. And yeah, it's very interesting to see how this ecosystem evolves, because also you get new business cases. Or, for instance, Blue Force has its lab within this building and offers a testing facility to the community. Q-Blocks, which is also, by the way, now in Boston with a facility here. They have their field lab there that's open to use for the ecosystem at large. So it's a great way to bring talent together, because we talked about talent. It's not only the PhDs, it's also other types of talent, and really getting this cross connections of innovations. And it's a word I like. It may be a bit non-technical, but serendipity. So in an ecosystem, it really, if you ask questions about how was your journey, it often depends on coincidence, meeting a person at a certain time in life or whatever, bringing things together. And I think with building such ecosystem, you enhance the opportunities of that kind of serendipity.
Yeah, everybody kind of runs into each other in the hall and exchanges ideas, and it's the whole work remote back to the office sort of discussion, I think, at a larger scale. So I guess we've talked about some of the programs and the engagement. I want to ask you the question from the private industry perspective. Sort of, what is the advantage of private industry actually partnering with government and working with government? I mean, I think I know that answer, but I'd be really curious as to you talked about participating in the SBIR program and those other things. What advantages or what value have you all gotten out of working with government?
Yeah, so I think that one of the advantages is speed. And I think that Michael alluded to that earlier. Startups are just a different animal in terms of speed. And especially when you have a whole bunch of them under one umbrella, and funding vector like the SBIR program, you can move capabilities very, very quickly. And then the other advantage is guidance. So as the government gathers information, whether it's threat intelligence or just generally about the need or the potential for quantum and quantum adjacent capabilities, they know what they want, but not quite. And working with industry, whether it's small businesses or large primes, can really help shape the requirements and drive some of that mission-led research. So it's about speed, and then it's also about guidance and helping. It's a two-way road where it's really a partnership with the government rather than treating them as a customer. They are informing you on what you need to build in order to meet their needs, and the other way around, you're helping them think about how they ought to approach a problem and view your solution.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always hear the joke when we talk about government technology. It's yesterday's technology bought and implemented tomorrow. But I have seen the government really lean in and be an early adopter on a lot of things. And you can go all the way back to the original semiconductor industry, right? I don't think the semiconductor industry would have taken off if government hadn't funded it. And I don't think companies like Oracle and Qualcomm are great examples where government actually funded the work that they were doing early on. They were their first customer. So I think government gets a bad rap in certain instances, but I think they can really partner with organizations and really kind of lean in and be cutting edge in a lot. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but that was my thought.
I mean, the example of the semiconductor microelectronics industry. Thank you. I guess on project as well as I think I do. I think is fantastic. I mean that was a real stimulus, and I think now now we talked a little bit earlier about the new role of government that it might take on, say shifting away from research. So again, speaking for a national lab, something that we're spending a lot of time thinking about is benchmarking. So there's could be benchmarks for quantum computers. You can use them to assess progress. You can also use them to diagnose what may be holding back the performance of a platform. So independent verification, validation kinds of things. I mean, there's a lot of research to be done in that space, and I think that's a role, especially for an honest broker lab, that's I think really well aligned.
Yeah, I think one of the things we miss too is government. As somebody that works in an innovative space with government, I like it. As a taxpayer, at times I don't, but government's willing to fail too, right? They're willing to invest money in something that may not work out, that a for-profit organization may go, yeah, it's too risky for us. We're not going to put any money in that. So I do think that's an advantage as well. I don't know if you wanted to add anything either.
Well, also a great example, you probably know ASML, the EUV company, that would not have been here if the government wouldn't have put in money in early days when they were going through some rough times. So yeah, indeed, the role of government can be crucial in these points of valley of death.
That's a really good example. So I know we're getting up here on time, but there is one other topic I wanted to really make sure we cover, and that's the topic of workforce. I attend a lot of these conferences and listen, and everybody talks about quantum and how we're going to scale it. But then the very next thing that kind of comes behind it is I don't know that we have a workforce right now that's even capable of doing that. So maybe I'll start with you. I know you're in the space and you're competing for talent.
Yeah.
From the private sector perspective, what are you seeing, and what role can maybe government play in helping with that?
Yeah. So my late grandfather was a quantum physicist. He worked at Lawrence Livermore. He had a PhD, but I think Michael, you said this earlier. The quantum workforce. Yes, we need PhDs, but it is not essential to the workforce. And especially in the case of post-quantum cryptography, you don't even need post-quantum cryptography experts per se. You just need more cybersecurity experts that are willing to take a look at it and realize that this is not such a big, scary undertaking, that there are solutions that exist today, that this is a perfectly reasonable technology for most folks to get their hands around or their heads around if they give it a try. And I think the same goes for quantum generally. You don't need to, the quantum workforce in the support system, you don't need to be working in the lab, but venture capital arms, program managers, all of these essential roles, just like any other field of research, are essential to quantum. And I think the biggest takeaway is getting our workforce to understand that quantum is not so far away, that it's here and now, and it's not impossible to understand, and you don't need to go to school for 16 years to jump into the field.
Yeah, you could be in the field now and kind of repurpose the work that you've got and add it into the quantum space, like the cybersecurity expert, I think is a really great example.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about DOE? How are you all handling the workforce?
So there is you picked a problem about which there's much to admire. I think it's very multidimensional. There is sort of Patrick is talking about folks who may develop kind of a quantum adjacent skills or have come from a quantum adjacent skill set and can develop quantum literacy, develop sort of a T-shaped skill set, if you will. I think that's very valuable. But it goes beyond that. I mean, you want to think about catching people, winning their hearts and minds to quantum at the high school level. So Cynthia, with DOE support, has some programs that are doing just that, teaching the teachers and the students to kind of get them to think about a STEM career. Here we have, or in this neighborhood, you have something called the Joint Quantum Institute. In New Mexico, there's something being set up between the two labs and the University of New Mexico called Quantum New Mexico Institute.
I think the university piece is going to really be key.
So that's a great way to get undergraduates and graduates exposed to this space. But maybe one other thing I want to add, which may not be immediately obvious. So again, I mentioned 17 DOE labs, a lot of deep expertise at these places that I think is highly relevant to this space. In New Mexico, at least, there is a state program that essentially allows a small business to get access to that expertise on sort of a more or less pay-by-the-drink basis, if you will, in order to access a deep expert who has decades of experience. You don't have to hire this person. You have to recruit them. You just have to bring your problem to them and work with them over some brief period of time to solve it. So I think that's maybe another way, until we've got students clamoring to be quantum scientists and technicians and engineers, and it's all happening by the thousands. Consider the national labs as maybe a sort of a reserve corps to help you address certain technical issues that you're facing.
That's interesting. And what about Europe? How's Europe addressing this workforce?
Yeah, it's similar. So it's about broadening the talent pool, because if you only focus on those PhDs in physics, then you don't. It's not going to scale. So, and it's not only that, but it is, for instance, what you see with the companies that we have in Europe now trying to scale. Their challenge is often in having commercial talent or business talent or technical talent doing work. So it's not only the R&D roadmaps or the science in the lab. So. Broadening the talent pool, and it also begins with already in founder teams. Make sure it's I don't know if I can use the word diverse, but a broad team. Put it in place from the start. It's important because it helps you to attract also a broad pool of talent.
Well, I think that was kind of what we had for today. So I appreciate the panel's time and the insights, and we'll be around afterwards if folks have questions, but thanks very much.